shining. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth. Long lay the world in sin and never pining, till He appears and the soul felt its worth. The thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices, for yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. Fall on your knees, though He the angel voices on night divine, oh night when Christ was born, oh night divine. Truly, He taught us to love one another. His law, His love, and His gospel is peace. Chains shall He break, for the slave is our brother. And in His name all oppression shall cease. Sweet hymns of joy in a great.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. This is Bible Fellowship's Christmas Eve service. Now, it's kind of a little different way to do it, and we intended to do it this way not because of lockdowns and things like that, but just because we wanted the opportunity for families to be able to stay together and share Christmas Eve together. And I know it's kind of, people are torn about having to come up to the church for a service, and they want to be a part of that. So we thought we'd bring it to you. So I hope you enjoy this. By way of announcements, the only thing that I would say is that I just want people to be aware that we are going to be live streaming Sunday morning, and that's going to be our Sunday morning service this week. And for the 27th and for the 3rd of January, this is the way we'll have to meet because of the current lockdowns in Ontario. So I am going to turn this over to our worship team, and I hope that you enjoy this. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, come, all ye faithful, joyful and triumphant. Oh, come ye to
So this evening, what I wanted to share with you is a little bit of my past with Christmas. And, Christmas is a time where we think about all the good times that we've had. We think about Christ's birth, obviously. That's what the season is all about. We think about this great gift that God has given us in Jesus Christ and how Jesus came to this earth and gave his life ultimately for us as a sacrifice so that we could live a new life, so that we could be free from the burdens of sin and these other things that really overwhelm us. And oftentimes we find ourselves at Christmas time looking back, especially the older you get. You're looking back at loved ones that you miss. You're looking back at good times with family and things that happened as your family was growing up. All these things are wonderful, exciting things. Even when it comes to the child and born in a manger and looking back at the birth of Jesus, and we're always looking back at this story. For me, Christmas Eve was always about anticipation. When I was a child, that's all it was about. It was like, and you can remember those times as well, looking back on it and thinking about going to my grandparents and being there for Christmas. And actually, for me, Christmas started even before that because for us, my grandfather raised Christmas trees, and we would begin selling Christmas trees on Thanksgiving. So from Thanksgiving forward, we were just looking forward to Christmas. All the grandkids got their start in sales selling Christmas trees on Grandpa's Christmas tree farm. And everybody in town, everybody from miles around knew that they could get their tree there. Now, I lived just down the road from my grandfather, so I got conscripted into working quite often. Another thing about Christmas Eve is that we always celebrated it at my grandparents' house. So the same grandparents. In fact, there were many times when people would show up on Christmas Eve looking for a last-minute tree, and my grandfather usually would just give it to them. They were no good to us after Christmas anyway. One of the traditions that we always shared together was we would read the Christmas story from Luke chapter 2. And interestingly enough, it was always the grandchild that had most recently learned to read that did the honors. So if you learned how to read that year, and I mean, you can imagine how that went. It was quite chopped up. It was oftentimes everybody is, the kids are getting restless and they're impatient, wanting to open their presents. And all we had to do was get through the reading in order to do that. And so, many times we as the other grandchildren, the older grandchildren would jump up and sit down next to this new reader and pronounce some of the words and maybe even get ahead of ourselves as they stumbled over those words. So it was an interesting time, but I always remember just really being excited about it. As adults, the way we view Christmas is that we read the story and we remember the events and we visit a live nativity. We do different things like that. We have fond memories of the past, and we thank God for this amazing gift. And, when you think about it, this gift, it's only the beginning. A lot of times we get caught up in the past and thinking about the past. And so tonight, what I want to do is I want to think about the future. One Christmas I remember getting an erector set from my aunt and uncle. And it was a small set. It was intended for you to build a dragster. So my wife, when I shared this story with her, she said, nobody's going to know what an erector set is. And I thought, well, it's kind of like Legos. You remember Legos, you could build all these different things, and then you get a kit that would be sure to build this one thing. It was kind of like that. Only with erector sets, you got pieces of metal that stamped steel with holes all over the place in them, and then a bunch of screws, nuts, and bolts that you could put things together, and maybe there would be a set of wheels or an axle, and then you could make certain things with this kit. And I just remember sitting with all my cousins, and we're all trying to put this dragster together. We're in my grandmother's kitchen. She's trying to gather up everything and set the table for dinner. We're all getting ready to eat. We're underfoot. It was pretty chaotic. It was always pretty chaotic time once all the grandkids came along. And I just remember thinking how Christmas morning, how can it be better than this? I mean, here I had the thing that I wanted, the thing that I was so looking forward to, a erector set, something I could build stuff with. I loved building things. And yet, when we opened our gifts the next morning, on Christmas morning, my parents had actually bought me a much larger erector set. In fact, this bigger kit had motors in it. Had pulleys and gears. I could hook them up to this dragster, and now this dragster, I didn't have to push it across the floor, but it would drive itself across the floor. I just remember thinking, man, it can't get better than this. Well, here's the thing. When it comes to Jesus, when it comes to the Christ child, and we think back on that time, and we think back on what a wonderful gift that was that God gave us, I don't want us to forget something. And that is that Jesus died so that we could have eternal life. And so this Christmas Eve, what I want to talk about briefly is I just want to share with you some passages of Scripture. They're from the book of Isaiah. Last Sunday, I preached from Isaiah and one of these passages. But there are many things in Isaiah's prophecy that look forward to the Christ, to the Messiah, and look forward to a time that we haven't experienced yet. So we've experienced and seen the birth of Christ. We have, if you're a follower of Christ, you've experienced what it's like to have Him working in your life, but we haven't experienced His total salvation. We're not saved until we spend eternity with Him. And there is a whole bright future ahead of us. Now, a lot of times pastors talk about it in terms of heaven and hell. And there's like this place that you go, and it's wonderful, and it's beautiful, and the streets of gold, and all these different imagery that we talk about. But the fact is that Christ is going to come, and He's going to establish His kingdom here on earth. And here's some of the things that are interesting about that kingdom, and something that I hope encourages you. First of all, He will establish perfect justice and equality. This is what it says in Isaiah 11, verses 3 and 4. And His delight shall be in the fear of the Lord. He shall not judge by what His eyes see, or decide disputes by what His ears hear. But with righteousness He shall judge the poor, and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. And He shall strike the earth with the rod of His mouth, and with the breath of His lips He shall kill the wicked. You know, I think about that, and especially the first part of that, where it says that His delight will be in the fear of the Lord. He shall not judge by what His eyes see or what His ears hear. That's how we judge things. We look at people and we evaluate them based upon what we see and what we hear. And that's one of the reasons that there's inequality and that there's injustice in our world. This has been a year where it's been unprecedented how ideas like racial injustice and racism and these things are thrown out there, and really it's been escalating in our culture and society. People are demanding justice, they're demanding equality, they want racism to end, and all these things will happen when we have a perfect judge, someone who doesn't judge us by what we look like, what color our skin is, someone who doesn't evaluate us based upon things that they hear about us, but somebody who can look at our heart and know us perfectly. And that's going to be a great place to live in. I can't wait for that time. Another thing that brings me great hope and joy is that everybody's going to seek Him. Listen to this from Isaiah 11 as well. Verse 9, they shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. In that day, the root of Jesse, that would be Jesus, who stands as a signal for the peoples, of him shall the nations inquire, and his resting place shall be glorious. Of him the nations are going to inquire. People are going to want to know about Jesus. I was just talking to somebody today, and I started to talk about the Bible and about the Lord. And this person, their eyes glazed over. They had heard it before. They didn't want to hear it again. They didn't want to talk about that. In fact, they thought Christmas was a wonderful time, and we were having a great conversation about Christmas right up until I mentioned Jesus. That's so interesting to me. There's going to be a time where nations will seek him. And I'm looking forward to being on that side. You know, sometimes you feel very much like a minority. And you know, there's going to come a day when we're going to be on the right side of this thing, where people are going to want to know my Lord. They're going to be hungry to know who he is. And I'm looking forward to how blessed and wonderful that day is going to be. A third thing, there'll be no end to his reign. Of the increase of his government and of the peace there will be no end. On the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and to uphold it with justice and with righteousness from this time forth and forevermore. Isaiah 9:7. You know, I don't know about you, but I get disappointed. Sometimes we get world leaders, people that are put in place in power, or even represent us on a local level, and they just seem to do a lot of great things. And the next thing you know, their term's up, and then somebody comes along, somebody who the people perceive to be better, and they vote that person in. And they may be better, or they may be worse. We don't know. But one thing we do know, that this perfect and righteous judge is going to be, his government is going to last forever. Forever. Just think of the good things that he'll be able to do when he doesn't have to worry about politically pleasing a certain group of people or making other people happy. But he is established there forever. I don't know about you, but I'm really looking forward to that. Someone who can lead, and who can lead from a pure heart. So there's going to be no end to his reign. Not only that, but it tells us in Isaiah as well that war is going to be eradicated. He shall judge between the nations and shall decide disputes for many people. Isaiah 2:4. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. That's a promise and a hope that probably some of you have heard before. It's something that we strive for in our world today. We want peace. We want people to get along. And when there's a righteous judge and he's going to judge between nations and they are going to do exactly what he says, some people call that tyranny, but not when it's a perfect judge, not when it's a righteous judge. He's going to decide disputes for many people, and he's able to do that because he's not doing it from what he hears or what he sees, but he's doing it looking into your heart. He's just going to know what the poor need. He's going to know what our country needs or our world needs or what our nation needs. He's going to know all those things. And I can't wait for him to fix all the wrong that there is in this world. You see, this is the gift that we can anticipate and look forward to. Not only that, but many of us look forward to this. Many of us have lost loved ones, and we're looking forward to being reunited. Many of us are facing in this year sickness. COVID is looming over us, and people are worried about sickness. They're worried about death. And the Bible tells us in Isaiah that sickness and death will be no more in this kingdom. Verse 24, and no inhabitant will say, I am sick. The people who dwell there will be forgiven their iniquity. Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened, and the ears of the deaf unstopped. Then shall the lame man leap like a deer, and the tongue of the mute sing for joy. For waters break forth in the wilderness, and streams in the desert. This is what we have to look forward to. The hope is, and our understanding, our realization is that when he reigns on earth, the sickness and death are going to be no more. This is going to be an unprecedented thing. We don't have to worry about it looming over us. We don't have to go on lockdown to make sure that we're safe or that our loved ones are safe. We don't have to worry about our elderly parents getting a disease and it being the end of their lives and not being able to spend Christmas with them or holidays in the future with them. We don't have to worry about what some of the things that we're facing right now in this Christmas season of not being able to spend time with those who we love. This is exciting news. This is wonderful news. And another great thing that goes along with that, another great promise is that he will restore the earth. Isaiah 41:18-19 says this, I will open rivers on the bare heights and fountains in the midst of the valleys. I will make the wilderness a pool of water and the dry land springs of water. I will put in the wilderness cedar, the acacia and the myrtle and the olive. And I will set in the deserts the cypress, the plane, and the pine together. That's an interesting, when you read that and meditate on it, it's so interesting. What he's saying there is he's saying things are going to grow in places they never grew before. Things are going, there's going to be water in places that there's never been water before. It's going to be, when you really meditate on it and think about it, it sounds like it's going to be what Eden was. Some of the things that are described there. Like the whole world is going to be like that. This is going to be a fantastic gift. How many of us are still pushing around the dragster? Christmas should be about anticipation. The Bible calls us little children. And we should anticipate this future hope with the anticipation of a child on Christmas Eve, looking to receive their gifts. We have the gift of Jesus. He came to this earth. He gave his life. He conquered death. He gives us hope. We have the gift of him living in us and living with us every day and being strengthened by that fact in the midst of a very difficult time right now and in the midst of life, which is difficult all the time. But one thing I want us to do this Christmas Eve, my hope for you is that this anticipation of Christ and what he's done and what he will do in the future, I hope that anticipation is something that gives you joy and strength in this Christmas season. We're looking forward to the completion of this world and this life because we know the one who has it all in control, who is going to take care of us. This Christmas we're facing lockdown, and many of us are away from family. We can't visit. We're frustrated with the past year. Some of us are facing some very real hardship as a result of all this. The Bible is clear that there's a day that's coming in which all that has gone wrong will be made right. If the only part of Christmas for you is a historical child in a manger, you're missing the best part of Christmas. Hope. My hope for you is that if you only know a historical Jesus, if he's not somebody that you walk with every day, if you have not trusted him with your future, if you do not hope in him for an eternity like the one that I described from the pages of the Bible, then I pray that this Christmas Eve is a time where you'll turn to him, where you'll give your life and your future over to that Jesus, that Christ child, that special Christmas gift. I hope this is an encouragement to you. I hope that you have a blessed time with your family. I hope that your anticipation of all that this Christmas would hold is something that brings joy to your heart. But most of all, I hope your ultimate hope is in this, not in all the things of Christmas, but the hope of spending eternity with Him. May God bless you. Have a wonderful Christmas.